Yo, what's up, guys?
GM,
GM.
Chad Cow.
GM Chad, Ohio, Chad.
Chad, Chad Cow.
We need a second cow, I think. Two cows, two Chads.
There's a couple
Three.
cows out there.
Really? Any Thor cows?
No, none that I've seen.
Someone should need to create like a mid-journey picture of like a cow with the Rune logo on its side, and that's for another cow right there.
We're still waiting on that theme song. Where's that?
Oh yeah, the barbershop quartet Rune tune.
I thought that was Chad's job.
Yeah, it was supposed to be my job, but building two protocols in a podcast and being a husband and a father is kind of time consuming. It's hard to find find free time for nonsense projects.
Yeah, this doesn't sound nearly as important as the theme song.
Yeah, I don't know. I just hear excuses. I'm just kidding.
How's everything going? I've actually been away. I just got back today, so just been catching up on everything and listening to the lending stage and everything, getting just resynced up. So I'm not really sure if there's been anything major that's been going on. It seems like it's been pretty quiet, but we're getting ready to get ready to launch lending.
Yeah, I think the two big things that's going on, well, actually three things I should say, is first one is launching Binance Smart Chain, and there's currently a community vote going on to go ahead with Binance Smart Chain or not. And then the next thing would be like lending, which is a big topic, obviously. And then the next thing is there's going to be a proposal in version 111, to change the how it calculates saver yield and how it generates saver yield to reduce the yield effectively. And so those are three interesting kind of current topics.
Got it. I didn't think I saw. I didn't think I saw the entire thing around savers. Like I know there's been discussion of, like ever since we've been adding POL. It's up to like 11.5% of the total liquidity of the Bitcoin pool, which is actually just like crazy by itself. But yeah, no, I've seen there's been some discussion. Is there any like firm uh, plan about that entire thing? Like what is the mechanism, and like is there going to be a vote, or just how is all that going to work?
Yeah, so there's a specific code change that's in 111 that's like coming out probably like today or maybe tomorrow for adoption, and then after that it gets adopted, it'll be like a vote on it. But the specific change is this: it's very similar. Right now, the saver yield is basically like a hard 50%. So if you put in $1,000, you basically get yield on $500 of that, right? So you get half of your yield. And it's like a static number. The reason why it was a static number to begin with was just to have the savers product be just very simple to understand, right? It's not a lot of, you don't have to think about IL, you don't have to think about like multiple asset exposure, you don't have to think about, flexible yield, flexing in one direction or the other. Like it's just very clean, very simple, right? Not much cognitive load to understand it, and then hopefully that would garner more people to get into it in a matter of speaking. And so the problem now is that Savers has been a very successful kind of feature, so much so that we're like nearing the cap of what the network can support from an economic security perspective. And once it hits that cap, the POL is no longer able to, deploy more room in the pool because we've already hit the TVL cap, right, the hard cap of the network itself. So then it becomes like, well, what's stopping the savers from growing, or synthetic more accurately, growing from 50% to 55% to 60% to more? Well, you can't mint more synths. That's true, right? The network won't allow you to mint more synths once it gets to 60% utilization. But after that point, if the synth asset were to grow in value relative to Rune, like we would grow beyond that 60%, of course, 65 and 70 and so forth and so on. It's theoretically possible. So the intention is like, well, how do we kind of curve the yield that a saver makes to, trend downward when we get closer to like hitting the cap, or the 50% marker or 60% marker or whatever it's going to be. And so the proposal that's being thrown at the community to kind of discuss and debate and argue about is, should we kind of adopt what Maya is doing on their Savers thing, which is basically a flexible yield. I think for Maya's case, they start at 80% income instead of 50, and then it trends down. I think like the lowest is 20, I want to say, or maybe it's 0. I can't really quite remember off the top of my head, but like the one that, as the code is written now, the proposal would be, to my knowledge, is that it would start at 50%, right? And then it would trend to basically 0 the closer we get to probably 50% utilization, cent utilization. So like that would be the proposal the community would have to discuss and argue about. But basically every saver would never get the yield they get today, because as soon as one saver is in the pool, it's now less than 50%, and it just kind of goes downward with more adoption as it goes.
So essentially, it just takes that. So right now, like basically half the yield is given to savers. It just changes the amount that is sectioned off between the regular liquidity providers and to savers based on how much synth utilization there is in that pool. So if we're at the caps, then it's close to 0 or 0, and then if it's low synth utilization in that pool, then they receive a higher percentage of the total yield.
Right. Definitely, like the winner in this scenario is definitely the LPs. Like the LPs will just make more money if this thing is approved and adopted. They're definitely the winners. Like they would make money from the scenario. The losers, of course, would be the savers, because they're always going to make less money than they've been making so far. Even in low synth utilization, they'd still make less money than they're making now. So that's kind of the thing to discuss.
So what brought this up? Like, is it just kind of feeling like savers are getting a bit too much free lunch, and like kind of just to make it more fair for LPs? Is that like basically what started this conversation?
Yeah, what started the conversation was like, we launched the Savers product, a few months ago, 6 months ago, something like this, and we wanted to like kind of give people like kind of the most appetizing deal we can reasonably give them, right, without going overboard. And that was been, that's why we've seen a pretty good adoption of savers, like in our pools and so forth and so on. And so we don't want to get to a point where, like, if we have too much synths in the network, it overexposes LPs to the Rune asset, right? Like, and I think the kind of the max number in my mind is, I really don't want to go above 50%. Like, we can go 60. And I wouldn't like freak out or panic or anything like this. But like, I think in my mind personally, like 50% is probably like a good number, and we want to keep it at that number and not go beyond it. If we go to that number, we're perfectly fine. There's nothing to worry about. We're at the optimal. And to my mind, I look at that as like the optimal balance, right? Is at 50%, because that means we have the more depth in the pools, more liquidity in the pool, which is great, which causes less swap fees, more trade volume. Like, that's a natural thing to occur with more depth to the pools, and that's a good thing. Once you get over that 50%, well, now like you're not really contributing to the TVL very much anymore. Like technically you are, but like it's not necessarily good for the protocol. You're now taking on more risk than benefit in my mind. And so what started the whole conversation was like, I opened an issue and floated an idea to the community last week, I think it was, or maybe the week before, but I think it was last week, of the idea of like negative interest rates, right? And so once we get beyond the 50% marker, that the interest rate goes from 50% interest rates to negative 0.01%, and it grows more intensely with the more beyond 50% we go, right? As a way of like saying like 50% is like the optimal place, right? And if we go beyond that number, we want to start creating kind of pressure or kickback, pressure back to push it back down 50% from the savers or synth holders perspective, right? And because arbitrage bots, they don't take yields no matter what, either up or down. They're not affected by this whole thing. It's only the savers that get affected by this concept. So anyway, so we had this kind of debate in the community, which it seemed like the idea largely wasn't passed, or people wasn't a lot of support for it. So then people started talking about like, well, why don't we just do 0% interest rates instead of negative interest rates, right? And from my perspective, this means that like that I don't think 0% interest rates will be effective in accomplishing the goal we're trying to accomplish in this thing, just because most savers are just like, they kind of set it and forget it. They're not actively managing their positions. They're not looking at their yield. They're just kind of like sitting there waiting for, money to come over a long period of time. But that was kind of the discussion. And then from that, there was a post in that thread about like, let's just do something similar to Maya effectively, where we're just kind of turning down, leveling down the income for savers as they grow in terms of their size of the pool. And that's basically where we are now. And so once we launch version 1.11, there'll be some sort of community vote to adopt or not adopt this idea.
Yeah, it makes sense. The whole thing with like negative interest rate, yeah, I could see that just being totally a non-starter, especially just because of everything that's been communicated to savers. It was meant to be like this set and forget type thing where it's like, all right, you put in your Bitcoin or whatever, and you don't have to worry about your principal. It's that's locked in, and you're getting continuous yield. So like I feel like introducing a negative interest rate would, it would definitely upset a lot of people. And even though that, I mean, there might be other solutions too, but like going to a 0% interest rate, you might be right that it doesn't necessarily solve the problem, because it is like a set and forget, type thing where people aren't going to be like managing their position on, like a short-term basis.
Yeah, I think the problem that I have is that like that argument that you're making, while a valid argument to be made, right? Like, well, what we told savers this and blah, 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 we want to maintain that, blah, blah, blah. That's all true. And I'm totally on
Mm-hmm.
board with that from a high level perspective. The problem comes at being like, well, what is appropriate for the network? Let's look pragmatists. Let's look at this logically. Let's look at this, like, how do we make sure that the network itself is safe and, can't get into, unhealthy states or something like this. And that's more important than like, promising savers, never get negative interest rates or whatever. Like that is objectively so. I don't think anybody would disagree with me on that. Like that's more important than like whatever, deal we give to savers, right? But that said, like, to be honest, like I don't think negative interest rates would even necessarily even occur in practicality, right? Because like once you go beyond that 50%, say you're at 50.01% or something like this, the burn rate or the negative interest rate at that point would be so infinitesimally small that it would be like basically nothing, right? And it would just like burn down to 50%. Like it would be very small amounts. It would just start like burning cents and getting down. So it would have very small effects. Or people would see we're nearing the 50% mark, and some people would leave before we get to that point, and therefore we don't get to that point. Do you know what I mean? And like, but 0% interest rates, like the problem with that is that if you say, hey, you're going from 50% to 0%, now they have to make a choice of like, oh, okay, well, either I stay in here now and I wait until tomorrow, because maybe tomorrow somebody's going to leave and we're going to be below 50%. I'm going to get my interest back, my 50% interest rate back. Or I pay money and I leave and I pay the fees to exit. And then I pay the fees again to re-enter, tomorrow when somebody, when the yield comes back or whatever the hell it is. And so like the interest rate, like there's more friction to staying, to leaving the pool than there is to stay in it. And that's partially why I'm not sure that 0% interest rates will be effective in accomplishing the goal that they're trying to accomplish, just because you've spent 6 months in the pool getting yield, let's call it a 3% yield, whatever the hell it is. And you're going to pay, 2% or 3% to leave because the swap fees will be high enough for you in that scenario that you basically burn all the interest that you made over the last 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is. And then you'll have to burn it again the second time when you like re-enter the pool tomorrow, which maybe you will just choose like, you know what, why am I going to waste my time? I didn't even get an income, blah, blah, blah. Like, and that becomes an argument people have in their minds. Like, I think on paper, people get very scared about the idea of a negative interest rate, right? And I understand why. Like, from just a surface level perspective, like I get why people are so reactive and why there's an immediate like kickback for the reasons that Kat was just talking about. But like the reality in practicality, would have like very little effect in terms of actually creating negative interest rate on individuals, but also ensure that the network will always be, in a safe and viable state, right? What I'm thinking in my mind, and I could be totally wrong about this, and if I am, I'd be happy if I was wrong about this, is that uh, the community just needs more proof, or try out the idea of negative of 0% interest rates or whatever, to see the response, right, and see what happens. And this is like what I'm like kind of concerned about with this new proposal personally, that like it's not really its incentives are not aligned with the problem, right? Because the problem isn't the interest rates of savers. That's not the issue. Like the fact that we get 50% interest rate on savers is not the problem. The problem is it's too many cents. That's a different concept, right? And so like you're not trying to balance the quantity of cents in that scenario. You're trying to balance the quantity of cents relative to LPs, which is not actually gearing towards the problem at hand. It's gearing towards some other problem. So the inevitable result of that, in my mind, is that either this proposal, if it gets adopted, has basically no effect and doesn't solve the problem at all, and basically like very few people actually leave, or it doesn't actually help us solve the actual problem we're trying to solve, or it's as a kind of a undercutting way of doing it, like doesn't actually quite undercorrecting the problem. It either does that or it has an overcorrecting problem where today you're making 50% on your position, and then all of a sudden you're making you know you know 0.1%, and then people start leaving, and then we push it back up to 1% or 2% or whatever, and it eventually goes to, maybe let's just call it 15% or 20%, whatever the hell that market will determine that percentage should be, whatever the hell it is, and we end up seeing more liquidity leave the network than was actually needed to leave to maintain a safe and healthy state of the network itself. You overcorrect the problem, and now the Bitcoin pool and the ETH pool are like more shallow than they actually need to be, right? And actually solves the wrong issue, right? And it kind of like kneecaps the purpose or the benefit or the goal of savers itself. And when you start having less people be savers in a scenario where we want people to be savers, we want people to add liquidity, we want people to be pools to be deeper, right? We just don't want to get to a point where its cents are greater than the quantity of LP, in a sense. Like that's the problem. That's what we're trying to solve for, not something else of creating a balance between X or Z. Like it just doesn't really quite create the correct balance we're trying to go for. It corrects it for a different balance that is not aligned to what's beneficial for the network itself. So like maybe I'm wrong about what I'm saying, and if I am, that'd be great, because I'd rather be wrong about this than be right about it. But if I'm right on what I'm thinking, is that like this will prove to be negative for the protocol, this kind of approach, in which case I hope that the community sees that and adjusts, and try something else that is more effective and achieves the goal that Savers is trying to achieve.
So one of the best outcomes would just be like more regular LP, right? So it's like, would that be something to try to figure out how to incentivize? Like, how do we just get more regular LP, which is kind of like the shifting of rewards, I guess, plays out into that, right?
Yeah, it does, in a sense. Like more irregular LPs come in, because their yield is going to be higher, and Savers is going to be slightly lower, and so that is being shifted towards the LPs. And at a on paper perspective, that kind of creates that incentive that you're talking about. Whether that creates the correct balance we want, because to me it's like we don't want Savers to be 25% and at dual LPs to be 75%. Like that's not optimal from my perspective, right? From my perspective, the optimal is 50%, because that's when we have the pool is the most deep, and we have the most liquidity and the cheapest fees and all these things. So like it's just going to create a different balance from what my personal beliefs is the balance should be.
Got it. Yeah, that's interesting. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. We'll see what the community thinks about it. I think that likely the thing would be adopted, most likely, I'm guessing, and we'll see how it goes. Whether it undercorrects or overcorrects, we'll see which one happens.
Yeah, I mean, either way, having a variable percentage of the LP fees going to savers. I mean, it makes sense no matter if you're trying to like whether the goal of that is to solve this problem or not. I think it totally makes sense because as the SID utilization increases, it does increase the leverage that's on LPs. So just by having something that's dynamic and actually giving more towards LPs when they're more leveraged, it puts incentives in the right direction. Like I mean, like totally what you said, where whether that magnitude is enough, but like it's definitely in the right direction of incentive alignment and putting things where they should be. When there's more leverage and they get more of the yield, and the people who are taking less risk get less of that yield. Like that's just that seems pretty basic.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, okay, it's a fair point.
I mean, is there any other solutions that that come to mind for you, or is that just basically the only thing like some kind of negative interest rate or low interest rate on savers?
No, I mean, I had opened up a PR for a different way of doing this, a similar thing, which was the interest rate for savers is on a cliff rather than a slope. And so if the synth utilization is below 50%, you get half your yield, you get 50% of your yield. And if the synth utilization is above 50%, or equal to 50%, I suppose, or whatever the hell the thing was, or above 50%, you'd get 0% interest. And so instead of being like a gradual thing that starts at 50% and then twiddles down eventually to zero, it just like says, hey, once you get to this point, like we're just not going to have any interest. And so like it just gardeners for more liquidity to be added until we get to a point where we don't want any more liquidity, right? It's like we want people to add more liquidity. Like it's not like we want less. We want more, right? And so we don't want to take away the interest rates for those people to add liquidity when we want them to add liquidity, right? Like we want them to add more. So because the problem itself is a cliff in my mind, it's like once we have 50% utilization, like that's optimal point. When below it we want more liquidity, and above it we want less liquidity. Like because the problem itself in my mind is a cliff, the solution should also be a cliff, rather than being a sloping system, which is not relational to what is in the best interest of the protocol itself.
I mean, just in terms of incentivizing liquidity, like I mean, this is something that I haven't really thought of like a good solution to because it's a difficult problem because you need people that want exposure to Rune, that want leverage exposure to Rune, and
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, like people that want to that obviously trust the protocol and go through like the just the technical complexity of like actually providing that liquidity. Like it's a difficult problem to solve because you need people who are aligned in all of those aspects. So yeah, I'm just like trying to think of other ways to incentivize dual liquidity provision because it's not really something that like even a lot of like THORChain interfaces offer. Like it's really like I mean obviously you can do it on like Thor Wallet and THORSwap. That might actually be it honestly for the for like the major front ends that support THORChain.
Right, right, right.
And even just reaching that larger audience of like who wants like just reaching them and saying like hey who wants to provide liquidity like that's it's a difficult problem to actually be able to solve. So yeah, I'm just kind of ripping on just like wait like how do you actually solve that problem of incentivizing dual liquidity? I'm wondering if there's just other mechanisms that I don't know if you thought of or just like anything else to just make dual LP just a more attractive product.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've tapped as much as we can reasonably do with it. Even like ILP was a thing for a while, and that was like another thing we did. And people are against ILP. Like some people are for it, some people are against it, and there's valuable arguments from both directions, valid arguments in both directions. But I don't think there's much more we can do, is from my perspective, to incentivize LPs more, other than like increasing the block reward or something like this. I think like what I had learned through the process of building this protocol and launching it and seeing how it kind of fares in the real market conditions is that like trying to get people to, buy Rune and hold it and sell half of their Bitcoin to Rune and do it. So it's actually like kind of a difficult thing to do. It's actually more difficult than I would have expected it to be honest.
Yeah, 100%.
And so like once we thought about the idea, like, well, we need the pools to be deeper, and we're trying to sell people on, buying Rune basically and being an LP and these kind of things, and we can do that. We've been doing it, and it's, for the most part, been, you can't argue it's been pretty good. But like once we realized that there was a way to do this on a single-sided perspective with like just BTC or just ETH or just Atom or whatever, like that became like an immediate thing of like, well, now it's growing the TVL becomes, quite easy at that point. And to be fair, like Savers has kind of proven that already. Like it's only been a few months and it's like already shown that it's a very well, adopted feature, right? And people are actually using it and all this kind of stuff. So like to me, it's like in the end, what we want from the protocol's perspective is just like we want deep pools. We don't really care if it's dual LPs or savers. We just want deep pools. We want that deep pools be managed in a way that is like healthy, right, and safe. And so like that's where like that kind of comes in, and I think the POL itself is like kind of helping to scale the dual side stuff as needed, right, to help it provide liquidity on the Rune side, because the protocol itself is is like the most diamond hand holder of Rune that you could possibly have. It's only operating in the best interest of the protocol and not the best interest of its like want to buy a Lambo or something like this. Like its only interest is to provide for the protocol and do with the best interest of the protocol itself. And so like it's now kind of stepping in and it's deployed almost 5 million Rune into the Bitcoin pool to help grow the liquidity, but also help support the LPs and also help the fees be lower, the swap fees be lower for traders and this kind of stuff. Like it's doing a really good job in doing what it does. And so like I think that's also helping on the dual side. It's just the POL.
Yeah, I've been noticing that tick up nice and steadily and kind of level off over the past like week or so. Uh, yeah, 11.5% of the pool right now with like I mean, it's 4 million Rune deployed, but I mean, it definitely has increased the total depth of the pool and just how much asset is actually in the pool. Like if you look at like I've been not checking it like super closely, but just checking like the pool depth and like how much Bitcoin is actually in the pools, and it actually does seem to like work as intended, sucking in Bitcoin into the pool and just making it deeper, which is obviously the intended thing. But the issue is the hard security cap at this point. And is that just because? So are we just close to the security cap because of the total effective bond and it being measured against the total effective bond rather than the total bond? Do you know how much room is actually left in like in the pools itself to be added?
Last I checked, it was about 3.3 million Rune is like, yeah, so it's the effective bond. And so people who don't know, the effective bond, like the total bond, the total number of Rune in the bonded notes, which is like, I think like 80 million or something like this. The effective bond is basically the amount of Rune that the bottom 2/3, like the lowest 2/3 bonders, which is effectively about 50 million Rune, right around that area. And so like right now we're at like 47 million Rune total in the pools. The effective bond is approximately 50 million. And so that's where the hard cap is, because if you can acquire 2/3 of the lowest bonders, like that's the amount of security we have, because that's the number of Rune that's required to Sybil attack the network and steal all the fees, steal all the assets. And so like that's just kind of what we call the effective bond, effective security. So we're about 3 million away from it right now. That's probably going to drop in the next like day or two, just because we're going to do a churn. Last time I looked, there was only one validator waiting to be churned in, which means there's probably going to be like one in and like two, maybe three out. And so the total number of validators will drop like by one or two. And then 3 days later, like it'll go back up to, 89 or something like this, like a slightly higher number. So it'll probably drop in the next like few days, to be honest with you. And with Binance Smart Chain launching, if that does happen, obviously that's going to create some liquidity in the network and burn out more of that 3 million buffer, that 3 million kind of like space we have now. And so like once we get to the actual cap, which maybe Binance Smart Chain does that, and it's only a 6 million, that's about 6 million depth of a pool, both for asset and Rune. That could happen maybe with Binance Smart Chain in the first like few weeks or maybe first month or something like this. And if that's the case, then we hit the max TVL, which means nobody can have liquidity. You can't mint more since like functionality effectively is unavailable for the community at that point, which is a good problem to have. It's like a champagne problem in a manner of speaking. Like we're doing so well that we've hit our cap. So then it becomes like, well, how do we solve this problem? Like, how do we actually, get away from the max TVL and actually get the max TVL to be a higher number? Well, that's where lending comes in, right? There's another one of the topics we're talking about in the community this week. Is like once lending is launched, well, maybe not the soft launch because there'll be like not a lot of loans going out because it's on purpose, but like once lending is like fully swinging, right? And you're having people opening loans, buying up room, which causes liquidity to be pulled off of Binance and back into the pools, which causes the order books to become, thinner in a matter of speaking and higher up in terms of price. And then you're burning all that room. Like that's going to create Rune's value to go up, which means the TVL like will also increase and the bond will also increase, and like that will, and synth utilization decreases in that scenario, right? So like that's like the next step to help scale its network even beyond where we are now. Is hopefully lending is going to play a major role in that.
So, okay, one thing about this, okay, so if we're so close to the like the hard security cap, why is the share factor between what goes to LPs and what goes to nodes only like 40%? Shouldn't it be like pretty lopsided if we're only 3 million rune or less away?
Right. So the reason why that is because we made a code change. I want to say a year and a half ago. I'm not really sure the exact number, but like that we changed the max TVL to be relational to the effective security rather than total security, right? The 80 million versus the 50 million, the 50 million versus 80 million, whatever it is. And so like the pendulum is swinging off of the total security, off of the 80 million number. And the max TVL is operating off of the effective security, which is the 50 million number. Do you see what I mean? And so like the pendulum can only swing so far in this scenario because the pendulum is using a different metric than the hard
Right.
cap is
But
actually.
why would they be
They're not
using
using
a
the same
different?
metric.
Why would they be using a different metric?
Yeah, so when effective security was first implemented a while back, this is something that I was advocating for, that the pendulum should swing with it. But Lena, amongst other individuals, were just like, no, I'll just keep it the way it is, and and just keep it that way. And there was a little bit of a battle about it and a disagreement about it. And in the end, I kind of like buckled on it just because I thought to myself, like, well, it's not that big of a deal right now. And if it becomes a problem later, we can always just like, make a 3-line change to fix it. Like it's not like a big deal or anything. So it's not really worth getting into a, forever argument about a problem that may not be an issue at all. So it's like, let's just wait for it to be an issue. And then if it is an issue, like let's rehash the conversation and deal with it as we want to. So that might be a change that may happen into the future. But then again, like if the savers change that is being, proposed in 111 version 111, if that is an overcorrection, as I suspect it possibly could be, then the whole max TVL problem kind of goes away because we start losing a lot of liquidity in the pools. Instead of having a 3 million gap between us and the max TVL, we have a 4 million or 5 million or whatever the hell happens from that thing. So it's like we may not even have that issue if we launch this like savers change, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not quite understanding why they'd advocate for it to be the effective for it to be the total bond on the incentive pendulum, because that's essentially uh like that's what's supposed to balance the total amount of security
Yeah.
and liquidity on the network. And if it's not like properly just like if all right, if we're maxed out and like the whole point is to basically drive LP yields lower, so that way LPs can choose to leave. Or is that the decision that's basically made, where it's like, well, we don't really want LPs to leave, so we don't really want to drive yields lower for LPs.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't quite remember the specifics of the argument for the idea of having operating off of two different metrics. I can't remember. It's been a long time, and I don't want to like misspeak or mislabel or kind of argue the other side.
Yeah, fair
I
enough.
agree with you personally. Like I think that the pendulum and the max TVL should be operating off of the same metric, whatever the metric that is. It should be the same, and that's what I was arguing for back in the day. But then it just
Yeah.
was debated against, and it didn't seem like an important enough issue at that time to like really kind of stick my feet in the mud about it, and just kind of like, you know what, we'll just go through what it is, and if it's a problem, we'll fix it. It's not a big deal.
Right. Yeah. This way, it kind of seems like it's capped on one side, but not on the other. So it's like if you can't pass the effective cap by adding liquidity, the only way you can is by rune dropping. So then that would be the only thing that would cause it to go past the effective security, which is then when the incentive pendulum would kick in, right? So like it's kind of like the safeguard that only kicks in a very specific scenario with the way it is right now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically, if we had like a magic wand, we just changed it right now, right? Just like with some sort of magical spell of some kind. The result, hypothetically, would be that the nodes would start earning a lot more money, and the LPs and the savers would be earning less money, and that would cause them to leave, and that cause hopefully more nodes to come, which may or may not be true. I mean, they're already earning like what is it, like 20% APYs, which is pretty sexy APYs with very little downside or risk. So it's already pretty, great on their side already. And like, there's the argument about like, well, if we increase it from 20% to 25 or 30, like, are we going to get more bonders? Maybe not. I mean, it won't be that effective in terms of attracting more liquidity. If 20 doesn't do it, then is 30 really going to do it? And if we start killing the yield for LPs and savers, or reducing it now when Bitcoin yield is relatively low these days. IL is relatively high because Bitcoin's a 3x downward from the bull market to the bear, and runes are like a 20x downward, so that creates a good amount of IL, and so that becomes like a problem of like, well, do we want LPs to leave now, or do we not? And to me, it's just like I actually don't really want LPs to leave right now. I think I
No,
want them to
I
stay where
totally
they
agree with
are.
you. We definitely don't want LPs to leave, but yeah, like especially, but it seems strange. Maybe the stranger change is more just capping the amount on the hard secure on the I forget the whatever term we were using, but the effective security cap, because like isn't that I mean that's effectively limiting how much like dual LPs we can actually support on the network. Like that part is
Correct.
actually limiting the amount of liquidity that we could support. And
Right.
well, like I mean, yeah,
Yeah, no, that's right. I think that was just like the change of like the realization that like, well, technically we can't do like a 2-to-1 ratio between savers and bond. Sorry, say bond and the pool itself, because of the effective security idea of like, well, you only need the bottom 2/3 to be able to attack the network. Therefore, it would be profitable if it was 100% full of the total security, it's effective security. So like that change was made, but yeah, I mean, this is another discussion we'll probably have a PR that's open. Maybe we won't. I don't know. Well, people can talk about it, but like, well, we might have a change or a vote going out to the community of changing how the pendulum swings on the total security versus the effective security. I mean, this particular case, like for nodes, like they're gonna like it because they make more money. So from a nodes perspective, like they probably vote yes on this because it means higher income for them. So I don't know why they would vote against it unless they feel like the lack of LPs or the leaving of LPs would be significant enough to cause a problem. Which I don't know.
well, it seems like the smarter way would be to do it the other way around, uh, where you stop it from being calculated off of the total effective security. So then that actually allows more dual LPs to enter the network, which is like, I mean, obviously from the node perspective, yeah, they want to earn more money, but like for network health, like we do need more dual LPs, and capping that for like this scenario where someone gets someone bonds in 66 nodes right now doesn't seem like the most likely scenario to be happening at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's also like the pendulum itself has like settings in terms of like the curve of that pendulum, for lack of a better term. Like I don't think it's actually, it can be programmed in a way that it's linear. The relationship between LPs and nodes are linear in terms of the income, and they can be coded in a way or configured in a way that where it's like non-linear, where it like swings more harshly in some scenarios and less harshly in other scenarios. So like that's the other kind of way of thinking about it, or another approach to the issue, right?
Yeah, probably good to have to revisit that conversation. I mean, especially since we're like, if we're approaching the hard security cap, then that's like a discussion we're definitely going to need to have at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, but then again, like if the savers idea passes, then this conversation about the pendulum may not be, needed to be had anymore, because we're no longer close to the TBL.
Right. So, like in the scenario that we do hit it, what actually happens on the network? Can people still make swaps if we're at the hard security cap?
Yeah, you can still swap. Swapping will still be fine. You can still withdraw liquidity. That'll be fine. You won't be able to add liquidity, and you won't be able to mint cents, but you'll be able to burn cents, like that kind of stuff. Basically, arbitrage bots would be less effective because they would be arbing via layer one, which is more expensive and takes more time. It's not as effective or as efficient as using synthetics to arbitrage pools. And so like the effectiveness of arbs would be reduced to pre-synthetic points. Like single chain chaos never had synthetics, and it took us about a year to launch synthetics on multi-chain chaos. We go back to that scenario, we don't have synths anymore being used for that purpose. That kind of stuff. But like, it's not like, if that happens, like I wouldn't be panicking or anything like that. It's nothing to be all that concerned about. Just like, well, we've basically hit the cap that we can scale to, and this is the maximum the network can actually scale in terms of the TVL. So, now we have a problem of how do we scale beyond this point? Like that's more of the concern than like the network is going to collapse or fall or something like this, or that. I'm not concerned about that.
Cool. Yeah, other things to talk, like, do you want to, is there like any interesting lending stuff you want to talk about? BSC, I know you had some takes on Binance Smart Chain as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a popular take, seemingly. It's kind of the unpopular position, but we voted on Binance Smart Chain like 10 months ago, whatever the hell the number was, to add it, and the conditions of the conditions of the network were different than it is today, right? And I think because of that, it warrants another look at it, an honest look. And back then, we weren't worried about hitting a max TVL, right? And when we were adding new chains, like we had plenty of space to add new chains, and so whereas right now we only got like 3.3 million, or how the number is, I haven't looked in a day or two, but like we don't have that much space, so the pool can only get so deep, and if the pool only gets so deep, it can only generate so much income. If it generates only so much income, and the operators have to spend only approximately $1,000 a month per operator, so that's approximately not $90,000 per month for the operators as a whole. Well, is it going to generate enough income to offset the cost of running the chain? And to be honest, that seems extremely unlikely to me, considering things like you would have to become like one of the biggest pools in the network, like about the same trade volume as like Bitcoin or something like this, and it's going to be like 6 times shallower than the Bitcoin pool. It literally cannot get that big relative to Bitcoin. So it's just like the odds of it accomplishing that task right now is very unlikely to me. I think objectively so. That's like I don't care how much Trust Wallet passes through that thing. It's just not going to do it. Especially when there's like other bridges they can use. They don't have to use THORChain. They can use other bridges that exist. Like, we're not the only providers, so they're just going to go somewhere else because the fees are going to be too high. So like this doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And plus, I don't want to get to a position where we're like adding new chains like right before we hit the cap, the max TVL cap. That just doesn't make any sense to do so. It's just completely illogical if you ask me. Not to mention that, like, by doing so, we're actually taking away from the POL's ability to enter more position, right, and to support the synths and support the Bitcoin LPs. Like, it's not only it can't do it anymore because we just launched a Binance Smart Chain, which is obviously not going to add that much value or liquidity to the network, considering that the pool won't get deep enough to allow it to do so. So it doesn't make sense to me to add Binance Smart Chain right now. In the future, that could certainly change. I'm not against Binance Smart Chain. I have no hate over here. It's just like, let's look at the network objectively. Does it make sense? And to me, it doesn't.
But does it cost the network or it costs the node operators? I mean, I guess there's some block rewards going to that pool, right? But like, if the node operators are willing to eat that expense and just like have THORChain be more effective and be like a better product, just like ramping up for when volumes come back and stuff, then like then why not if they're willing to like foot the bill for that?
Well, nodes get block rewards no matter what, right? So they're not going to get more block rewards just because Binance was added tomorrow. So the block rewards are unchanged or after shifted. The question is, did they get income from the swaps? Enough income to warrant the cost. Now, if you want to make the argument that node operators are like, you know what, I'll burn $12,000 a year of my own money just so that we have Binance Smart Chain on the docket, then they can make that choice. It makes little economic sense to me right now, to be honest with you, but they can make that choice, and maybe that's the choice they're going to make, right? They can do that. They know they can make whatever choices they want, right? But why not just like add Binance Smart Chain when it makes more sense to, rather than when it doesn't make sense to? Like, we're at the bottom of the bear. Adding Binance Smart Chain right now is not going to like. The only thing is really going to, like, it's not going to move the needle of THORChain success, right? We want THORChain to be successful and achieve the goal of the number one cryptocurrency exchange in the world, bar none, including centralized exchanges. Like, adding Binance Smart Chain is not going to accomplish that right now. It's just not going to move the needle very much. What is going to move the needle is lending, streaming, swaps, like these kind of things. Those things will certainly move the needle. At least in my opinion, that's true. But like, Binance Smart Chain will not move that needle now. It might do it in 6 months or a year or something like this in the future. Sure, awesome, let's do it then. But right now, I just don't see how it makes sense.
I mean, do
I
you
see where
think
you're
that
coming from.
AVAX or Atom move the needle at all?
No, I don't.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you, hundred
Yeah.
percent.
Like we have never added a chain, with the exception of Terra. We've never added a chain to the network that has actually moved the needle. Like, it's been, we add some new chain like AVAX, whatever. There's a few tweets about it. People kind of like clap on Twitter for all of 5 minutes. Then like, that's it. Like, because none of those chains actually had buy-in from those communities, right? Like, like the people behind AVAX, the marketing teams, all this stuff, like they don't care. Like, and same thing with Doge, like all these guys, they don't give a shit, which why I don't understand. We can get, that'd be a different topic and different conversation. But like, the only chain we've added that actually like had a lot of value was Terra. And unfortunately Terra collapsed, and so we don't have that value today. But like, we had huge income coming from Terra nodes. We had huge liquidity being added to the network. We had like tons of swaps happening because the Terra community is behind it. Like, Doe was all about it. They were tweeting about it. They were going to integrate with every wallet within the Terra ecosystem. Like, they were like totally 100% on board, and they were like fans, right, of THORChain. And it made sense in that scenario. So like, I think we like, even though a chain like Dash, for example, like, I'm not personally a big Dash fan, right? And I don't really care about Dash or Binance Smart Chain or any of these chains. Like, my personal opinion of whether I buy or hold those assets has nothing to do with this conversation whatsoever. Like, but the Dash community is like behind the idea of being added, and they're like all in it. And even though the liquidity of Dash is far less than Binance Smart Chain, and the trade volume is far less, like, we would capture a higher percentage of that trade volume from that community. We launch Binance Smart Chain tomorrow, like, the total number of trades and swaps we're going to get from that is probably not going to be that much, to be honest with you. Same thing as AVAX, and same thing as Gaia, and same thing as like all these other Doge and all these other things we added since we launched multi-chain chaos now. It just doesn't seem like it's like, we can't just, adding chains does not just like cause more liquidity to come. It's just like, obviously we've seen this happen time and time again, and we just like needing to be reproven the same issue over and over again, which is just like, we're in an infinite fucking loop now, which is just like so frustrating. It's like, stop adding random fucking chains. I know people like high market caps, which is something that I personally believed in also at the beginning of like the launching multi-chain KSM. Like, we gotta add the highest market cap asset. Like, I fell into that assumption incorrectly myself. But then I was like proven wrong by adding a bunch of chains like Doge and AVAX and whatever else. And it doesn't add liquidity. It doesn't add trade volume. It doesn't work that way. You just, what does work is just getting the other community to be like, yeah, let's fucking do it. Let's party, right? That's what works. So like, I'm all for adding Terra because they were all for it, right? I'm all for adding Dash because they're all for it. Radix is another chain, slow market, a low market cap, but like that entire community become like diehard Rune fans, become THORChats themselves, and create more value into the product than Binance Smart Chain will.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I mean, yeah, I also agree. Like, yeah, it might be 6 months, 12 months, maybe never. Who knows until like an integration like that is actually valuable. But it does seem like the nodes are in favor of it. At least, I mean, the vote's not over, but uh, I'd be. I mean, I know the nodes are anonymous for the most part, but like, I don't know if anyone sent any messages in, but it seems like they want it, so they're signaling that.
Yeah,
Um,
but I just feel like the arguments that people make for it, from what I've seen, is like is just based upon this belief that, hey, look at Binance Smart Chain. It has total like the TVL in that chain, and the liquidity and the trade volume is like great. Let's capture it. But like we keep on seeing this doesn't work that way. You just can't.
Yeah, I still. I mean, I just like in my mind, I see THORChain as getting like it becomes it, it's like it becomes exponentially more valuable with every other chain that's in it, right? Because then you can go from everything else that's already integrated to everything that new chain brings in, and like over time, it feels like that is really like the huge value prop of THORChain is like
Yeah,
you can go from anything to anything and not just like, oh, well, you can go between these five chains because these are the ones that make economic sense. It's like rather if you can just be the everything dex, then it's like you just become like the leader in that sense. But
yeah.
I don't know. I see both sides, but
I agree with what you're saying. Like I would love to be the anything dex, as you put it, like and have Binance Smart Chain and various other chains, and as like I've been more bullish, to be honest with you, with like a higher quantity of chains in THORChain than like probably anybody else within the devs. Like I'm actually for like having 30 chains or something like this. Like something like most devs are just like they just want very few. And like for me, I'm all for adding more, but the caveat is that we need them to be into it. So like let's imagine a hypothetical scenario where lending is doing well and Rune pops off and the price creates like eyes on the asset and eyes on the project, which is natural to occur when your price is pumping. And like maybe from that, like people start being more aware of us and be more interested in the project and more see us as more like innovators, whatever. Maybe the people behind Binance Smart Chain, the Binance people themselves, start to see that value, blah blah blah, and integrate or whatever, or like get behind it. But like even like, Binance, like our team, like we have communications with that team as we first listed our token years ago, and like in the conversation we've had so far with them, like there hasn't been thus far we've asked that they be interested in like co-marketing or whatever, and it's just like dust. It's like silence from them, right? Like meanwhile they support like any swap multi chains, like any swap on their UIs. It's just like which has already been like rugged, and all the money's gone. Like it's just like so frustrating in a sense.
No, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I'm personally in touch with some of the Binance, like the BNB chain people, and like they're everyone that I've talked to in the Binance ecosystem, whether it's the Trust Wallet people or like the BNB chain people, they're all super supportive of seeing BSC on THORChain. Like obviously we're like they consider us like partly part of the ecosystem already because we have Beacon Chain, which is very successful on THORChain. But I definitely wouldn't say that there's no support. It's something that I'm definitely working on is just like just
Well, let me ask you
seeing that we
this:
get that
is there
support from Binance. Yeah.
is there is there any public support? Like, will they provide capital to the pools? Will they tweet about it? Will they do spaces? Will they like? Is there any kind of public support rather than just like a pat in the back via an email?
Yeah, I mean that kind of thing. I mean that's yet to be seen. Like obviously, like we don't know what's really going to happen at the end of the day. But it's not anything that can't be undone either. It's like if Binance Smart Chain turns out to be a huge mistake, then we get rid of it. It's same as AVAX or Atom or really anything else. So I mean, like obviously, like we like as like a group of people are up for like experimenting with things and like it even rolling back things that don't make sense and just adapting to whatever circumstances come our way. So like
Yeah.
uh So I mean, it's not like anything that's done. Like we get Binance Smart Chain, and it fails. It's like, oh my god, we just ruined everything. It's just like, all right, well, if it sucks, then it's out. It doesn't need to stay forever if it's forever a bad decision.
That's true, but like it's always harder to remove things than to add them, right? Like
Yeah.
even in like just traditional politics, if you add a new healthcare something, whatever, that's really great, and then people start using it, and then like a year later, you're like, well, we're going to remove this thing now. It becomes more toxicity and more arguments, and like it's like it's more difficult, from a consensus perspective to like a governance perspective
Well, you're right,
to
but
remove something.
like a failure would be that nodes are losing a bunch of money per month and not getting anything in return. Which I think it's not like if things are going south in terms of like, hey, this is like cost way too much, and there's no support, and Trust Wallet didn't do any volume, then it's like that there would be no reason. Like it's all just economic incentive. If there is
Right.
if there is like enough actually going through that pool to incentivize the nodes to keep running it, then they'll keep running it. And if it's murky, then it's murky, and maybe it doesn't get resolved. And then if it's straight up bad, then it gets booted out. Which
Yeah.
I mean, that could happen to any chain that's like currently on it today. It could happen to Beacon Chain, which is like far and away one of the most successful on THORChain. Obviously, it's been there since the beginning, and THORChain was a BEP2 DEX beforehand, but Beacon Chain might not be around forever. Like it's probably going to go away at some point, right? In favor of BSC.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely true. And we can do the experiment. We can try it. We can add Binance Smart Chain and come back in a month and like say like what's the bin, what's the liquidity at, what's the trade volume at, how much nodes are making, right? All that stuff, and we can.
I think we gotta come back in like 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, because to me it feels like what the nodes are signaling is essentially. I think the nodes understand your argument, and I think they're basically signaling, yes, we're going to lose money for now, but let's do this to lay the groundwork, see how it goes. A lot of the things that Cow just said, and yeah, maybe I'm spending $800 a month and making $200 a month right now, but maybe in 12 months I'm spending $800 and making 5,000 a month, right? So,
also, like we've said this before in the past, but we didn't explicitly say it today. But just increasing the total decentralization of the network, as in like how many bare metal nodes there are, which is one of the metrics that like we for sure need to increase, and like it's something that's a very difficult problem to solve. But like adding new chains that are like quote unquote expensive, like what do you think about that? Like we had Binance Smart Chain, and cloud providers are like cloud node operators are hurt financially because they need to run more. They need to run a BSC daemon, but if they're already on bare metal and they're just like, all right, well, all right, sounds good. we'll see you next week, and they're unaffected, and it just increases the push towards bare metal.
Yeah, that's true. Like a valid point. Like if you are running a bare metal node now, most likely, although I don't know the specifics of that person's hardware, of course, but most likely they can just run this on top, and it doesn't actually add any additional cost from their perspective, from a bare metal's perspective. But if you're running, AWS, whatever, it's going to cost you extra $1,000, so that creates more pressure to get rid of the AWS node and spin up a bare metal node. So maybe that'll be the result of Binance Smart Chain is to increase the quantity of bare metal nodes, which would be great. That'd be awesome. But like not everybody who has a node operator has the technical expertise to run bare metal. Bare metal is a lot more difficult to run than something on the cloud provider.
Right. But I mean that's another question too. Like, do we care about how technical they are? Like the end goal is to be like to increase the total decentralization of the network. If that's the end goal, then it shouldn't matter if like, all right, if this guy can't cut it, then what's he gonna do? We're just gonna keep running on cloud services forever.
I don't know. In that particular case, maybe. But like we only like theoretically the best case scenario is like we would get like 6-7% of the nodes would be running on bare metal. I don't know how much of them on now. Like I thought it was like 10%, but maybe it's closer to 15 or something like this today. And so like getting a number up to 67% would be hard because it's asking a lot of people to do very difficult things. but it'd be great if we can get there. And what's better than financial financial incentives to get there, I guess.
Well, yeah, exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I agree with you. I agree with you.
I don't know. I'm excited for BSC. The BNB. It'll be fun, man. Come on.
It'll be fun. It'll definitely be an interesting case, just like an interesting case study, right? To see how it actually fares and how it actually performs, and being at such a large deck with large liquidity, a large ecosystem. We'll watch it
Yeah.
closely and see what happens.
No, I totally understand the whole Terra point, and also I feel like what Terra proves is that like we can launch new chains on THORChain and have it be successful. And whether they need to be like frenzying to LP, like obviously that's a huge like positive driver towards the success of it. But it does prove that we can launch a new chain on THORChain and we can see success come out of it. That doesn't have to end in
Right.
a Terra scenario, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
every chain that we launch has
And
failed.
Binance already holds Rune, right? So like, wouldn't it? I mean, it would make sense for them to LP, like even more than it made sense for like Terra or AVAX or something else, right? I mean, they literally would just pair their Rune and pair their BNB.
Well, it's also customer
I don't know how
cautious,
much.
so
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I thought like
I'm sure they do.
I
Have
mean, don't
some,
they just
yeah.
have from
They
like
have some.
their early investment, not the
Yeah.
customer deposits.
They have some room, but they have to keep, because it's a traded asset right on their exchange. They have to keep some of it, in their cold storage, so that they can pull from it if they need to. They can't just put it like all like on a remote. Put it on THORChain or whatever. Like, you have to keep some of it kind of on hand.
Yeah, Binance is interesting because it's so many different entities that are like in part of like one umbrella. Like the Trust Wallet people are their own group. Then there's the BNB chain people, which are separate from like the Binance people. It's all just different groups, and they're all there's a lot of people that actually work for the whole Binance umbrella, and then like smaller groups that work in those smaller groups. It's definitely interesting to
Yep.
kind of to see how honestly I don't even know who to ask about like LPing or things like that, but like the actual like
I mean,
developer people are very excited about BSC on THORChain.
we've been talking to them for a long time about like getting them to run nodes and that kind of stuff, and it's kind of difficult to get them to do it, and that's like, I mean, they've even made complaints in the past about how we update the network too frequently. Like, we make too many changes or innovations too fast, and they have a hard time keeping up with all the changes and having the time that they want to evaluate changes and all these kind of things. And like, to me, it's just like, we're moving fast, we're shipping. Like, we're not, I'm not slowing down.
How about we talk about what you are excited about, which is lending?
Yeah, I'm
What's
excited.
yeah.
I'm excited. Obviously, I've been excited for a long time on lending. I'd be really interested to see how it fares once it hits a real market response to the concept. We just did a spaces or stage, stage, whatever it is, Discord stages, whatever it's called, last week, where we kind of did some technical like deep dives and that kind of stuff, and Q&As and that kind of stuff. It was actually really good. It's on I think
I just pinned it to the top.
posted on
It's
YouTube.
it's on Nine Realms' YouTube. So and posted in Dev Discord. I just tweeted it out a little bit ago. So the whole recording is up. It's basically just the entire like soft launch process, which is going to be the scaling period where like initially like not so usable and minimal front end support, and then after just validating some of the concepts and actually testing it like in the wild with on actual mainnet, then eventually we scale up and basically raise the cap, so to speak, and yeah, then we're like game. We launch all the front ends, and then that's when we actually make all the pushes that we want to make.
Yeah, one of the interesting conversations we had in that chat was about a team called Block Science. I don't know, THORChain, sorry, familiar Kyle, do you want to kind of talk about that real quick, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I know a little bit about block science. They have a program called CAD, which is it basically does like token economic simulations. So they're going to be running a bunch of simulations on just the whole entire lending program. Now, I don't know like too many specifics about it, but they're basically going to be recommending the uh, the starting parameters for lending, some of the success criteria, and just kind of be there as a partner and someone that is experienced in the whole like economic design area in just being there to also help keep an eye on the lending protocol with Nine Realms and the core devs.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to have them as a partner to kind of help have a third party, unbiased third party to, like to analyze the economics and the design and model it out and kind of give some ideas or feedback or on concepts and ideas, and even make suggestions about, what should be the launch parameters for the feature, like, what should be the max cloudization ratio, what should be the min cloudization ratio, that kind of stuff, and make recommendations based upon their modeling and that kind of stuff. And it'd be great just to have another experienced economic team to take a look at it and give us their honest feedback. Like, we obviously aren't paying them to scratch our back in a matter of speaking. We're paying them to do a deep analysis and give us a legit and authentic response, right? And so I'd be very interested to see their reaction and thoughts.
So is the idea to have it, and I haven't listened to that stage yet, so I might be a little behind. But is the idea to have it go live on mainnet kind of quietly, like before front ends go up? So like while there's those caps in place, kind of get it like tested in the wild, but not like fully push it. Is that kind of like the expected rollout?
Yeah, I think so. Publicly, like, Nine Realms has been talking about like a soft launch and a hard launch, and the reasoning behind it, if I understand Pluto's like messages, is that the soft launch will be quite small and tight, and the product itself wouldn't be very usable on any kind of like larger scale, just because we have very tight parameters around it, just to keep it small and the risk very low in the earlier days. And we'll spend some time just like analyzing the performance of it and making sure that the behavior is correct. There's no bugs or conditions that are causing unfavorable scenarios, whatever, and be monitoring that closely. And then if we find any problems or issues, obviously just make a patch and carry on. And so that once we feel that like we've tested it, in the live, with real people opening loans and closing loans and whatever else, and we feel that it's performing quite well, we can probably move it from soft to a hard, launch soon after. How long that is, I don't really know. Like, you know, the community will really tell us how long it's going to be more than anything else, right? In my mind, like, I'm more inclined to keeping that on a shorter range, like, in which is my own 2 cents. Maybe you launch it for like 2 weeks or maybe a month at most, and then just go ahead and let it fly. Not let it fly as in like no caps or anything like this, but like just let it fly as in like scale up the caps.
And just to expand on that a little bit, it's not even just for like testing everything and making sure everything is live. It's also so we can coordinate just like a general push out there, because like once lending is live, there's going to be like everyone's going to want to say like, hey, lending is live, tell everyone. But if we launch lending in like this capped state, it's not going to be like on day one, it's not going to be in the usable state where we can say like, all right, like everybody tell everyone. If everyone does that, they're going to see really bad CRs. Like it's not going to be in the state where it's ready to be presented to a larger audience. So part of the reason for this like soft launch hard launch phase is also to make sure that that interfaces are like ready to go, and not just ready to go, but like actually polished, and have done their own testing with lending live on mainnet to like have some really nice interfaces for people to actually take out loans with. Uh, yeah, and in addition to that, coordinate like the messaging because like I said, everyone's going to want to scream from the rooftops when it's live. But if we do that and then lending isn't in like a ready to go state where people are ready to actually, take a loan out, then there's really no point in us saying like, hey, it's live, but like it's not usable. So by separating out the launch into like these two different phases of the soft launch and the hard launch, we can coordinate better on actually getting the correct messaging out there and just coordinating on like the whole like marketing end of things and actually like letting people know the protocol is live, because if we waste all of our firepower on lending being live but capped, it seems kind of like a waste to me. We only really get one shot at launching the lending protocol, so uh, having as much coordination as possible, I think, would be really desirable. We set a date. That's when all the front ends start pushing it out, and then people can start tweeting about it and things like that. And we make all the community outreach that we can, but making all the noise before it's really in a usable state and ready to go. Just I don't think that's the kind of lending launch that we want, to let everyone know, and then it's like, all right, yeah, well, you can take out
Yeah,
1,000% CR loan. Well, it's like, all right, well, they're just gonna close
that
the
makes
page
sense.
and
Yeah,
never come back.
and like for THORSwap and other interfaces, that'll give us time to really like dial in the UI and really dial in the messaging and the education and all of that around it. Like maybe THORSwap can have it up as like even have like a beta tag on it or something like that, or put it under like advanced mode or something like that for the early
Yeah, I'm
stages.
sure that
Yeah,
interfaces will be launched before, and they should be launched beforehand to like actually test them and make sure that like everything is good with that. But like, yeah, the whole point is to make sure everything's like polished. Because if things aren't ready to go, then it's not going to be a good experience when we actually do the hard launch and want people to see and use the product. Like like even if everything is perfect on the THORChain end, which like obviously we're hoping it is with all the regression testing and stage net testing that's going to be done beforehand and everything. But yeah, the front end is what delivers the user experience. So if like the THORSwap front end, if the Shapeshift front end, if the Thor wallet front end, if everybody isn't like ready to launch the product and they kind of do it really half-assed, that really doesn't it doesn't drive anything towards lending itself. So yeah, we got one
for
shot,
sure.
so there's no point in not doing some coordination community
Yeah.
wide.
Well, THORSwap's on it. I know the UI is being worked on right now. I'm trying to give feedback and like help that along, make sure it looks nice and clean and simple. So yeah, I mean, if you guys, anyone have thoughts, hopes, dreams about what it should look like, what things like that, definitely all ears.
Yeah, it's probably going to be it's just as important to make sure that things are down for like tracking your position and to like close out your position as it is to like open a loan, because like all right, like anyone can just make a page where it's like, all right, well, send this much and this is what you get, but then like actually delivering like a good experience of like, hey, this is how much you have to pay right now in this coin that you specified in order to pay off your loan, or just being just really holistic in delivering all the information that is like needed to like properly inform a user of what's going on.
Absolutely, yeah. Just like a slight leak here, like on the THORSwap like UI, there's like the borrow tab, and then there'll be like a separate like my loans tab that has like a really nice like portfolio overview of like your entire loan positions, even if you have like multiple on different assets, and then shows like a breakdown of each one, and like you can either deposit more, withdraw. So yeah, for sure, it's not just going to be like send your Bitcoin and maybe you'll receive a loan. Like no, it'll be tight. It'll look really good and be easy to manage and all of that.
Yeah, the tough thing for the UXs on this feature, at least for now, is going to be like um, dealing with like the slippage of the double swap that occurs when you, or quadruple swap technically, when you open a loan or close a loan. And so like the virtual depth of the derived asset pool can shift very quickly. Even within a block, it can shift very fast. And so like from a UI perspective, if you have a loan open and you want to close it, for example, and there's a lot of trading going on, like the volatility is high, a lot of volume passing through those pools, a lot of people closing loans or opening the loans, whatever. In order to pay back your $2,000 loan, you actually have to pay back more than that, like $2,100, $2,300, $4,000, whatever it is, depending upon the depth of the virtual pool, right? And then you also have the virtual pool. That's the virtual pool of the Tor asset, and then the virtual pool of the Bitcoin asset, which is like assuming Bitcoin's your collateral. So then, like you have to overpay your loan. We'll just call it, instead of paying back $2,000 you owe, you actually end up in that particular moment you have to pay back 2,500, right? And then on your Bitcoin, you get back, instead of getting one BTC back, you get back zero point 0.8 because of the slips that are paid, because the virtual pool depths are shallow. And you can put like targets on these things so you can protect yourself from getting kind of like paying a higher fee than you wanted to pay. So that's not really an issue per se. But like to from a UX perspective, like how do we show this to the user is kind of a complicated and difficult issue.
So, I mean, can it be like a swap where you can kind of get like the query to show you the expected output before, or like is it?
Yes. Yep,
Okay.
that's all going to be in the quotes endpoint for opening and closing loan. All that I think all that information is already there, but like it's going to be a counterintuitive thing of like, hey, I have USDT, I'm going to pay back my loan, which I owe $2,000, but apparently I need to do 2,400 or something like this. I'm just making them random numbers now, but like that would be a counterintuitive thing. And then you agree to that 2,400, but then you actually needed 2,500 because in the time span of when you submitted the 2,400 and the network received your asset and processed it and all these kind of things, that the virtual depth has become even more shallow, and therefore it's not enough money to pay off the actual loan. And then what happens there, and then all that kind of stuff, right? So it's just like, and you can get a refund, just like you can get a refund on a swap that is not able to respect the trade target that you specify that you want. It's conceptually basically identical. And so like you can get a refund, and then you're confused, like, why did I get my USDC back? And and like that's like it's a UX thing that's going to be kind of a tricky to solve. And that is until we actually allow derived assets to be just general purpose assets. Right now, it's only used by the lending protocol for accounting purposes, but it's coded in a way that we could literally flip it on tomorrow in a matter of speaking, and then they all become just general assets that you can just hold. So when you want to pay back your Tor, you can just like swap to Tor and then pay back the 2,000 you need, and you just paid it back rather than overpaying it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really cool.
And by the way, like that idea is like, it's there in part to protect the network from two scenarios. Like one is we don't want price manipulation happening. People like embellishing the Bitcoin price to be like, $500,000 per coin, and then opening a loan because whatever the CR is, it doesn't really matter in that scenario. They would get out more than they put in, and that would be price manipulation. That would be an exploit on the network. The protocol would lose in that scenario, which is not good. And so like we do this to protect the network from, attacks, but we also do it to protect the network from like bank runs. So in the scenario where a bunch of people are trying to close their loans because they're panicking or whatever the hell's happening in the market, some sort of flood events occurring, whatever the hell it is, like everybody can leave for the door if they want to, and it's up to you if you want to leave at any particular time. But if you leave during a time when everybody's leaving, then the fees are going to be a lot larger. So the amount that you're going to have to pay back the loan, and the amount that you're going to get back when you get back your collateral, would be more money to pay the down loan to get less of your collateral back, right? And that's there to help create an incentive to have people chill the fuck out when there's some sort of like flood event happening, and just like by tomorrow the whole thing's probably a non-issue, like most time it is in crypto.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the most difficult things to actually communicate on like the front ends themselves. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
communicating like
Right.
virtual depths, and like, hey, there's a lot of volatility right now, and like that might, and the volatility is what actually causes the rate of like what you're paying back to be lower than if there was less volatility. Like that, I'm not sure in what period it takes that like sample of what the volatility is, but like, yeah, that's the difficult thing to actually like communicate to the user.
Right.
And something
Right.
that probably can't even be solved in like a soft launch scenario. Like these are just things that will have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
like solved as just as time progresses. Things will happen, and then brands will have to like solve their own communications issues and things.
Yep. It's just going to be like, it's kind of going to be a funny thing of uh, like from a UX perspective, that this creates a challenge for the UIs, especially to kind of explain and understand and present their UI in a way that is like makes sense and is clear and concise to the user. But like then there's also like people who just kind of want a centralized kind of experience, right? But a decentralized like action. Like it's almost like people want like the best of both worlds. They want everything good about about centralization and everything good about decentralization. Put them all together and have this like perfect kind of baby. And like obviously that's like completely impractical and quite ridiculous in a lot of ways. It's like I want a car that can fly and also drive in a in the ocean and then also be able to be a
Well, yeah,
submarine.
everyone wants
It's just like
everyone wants decentralized swaps, and then everyone wants to pay the decentralized rate. We've seen it time and
yes,
time again.
it's kind of this. Yeah, it's like it's people want everything about everything, like all the good things about everything, and none of the bad things about anything, and that's just obviously not practical or possible in many scenarios. And this is like one of those scenarios where it's like the UX is a challenge because it needs to protect itself from like attacks and manipulation, which you don't need to protect yourself in that scenario in a centralized exchange because like you have all like if anything is going wrong, then you can just pull the lever and like cancel everything, right? And like you have that kind of control. So like, well, you don't generally have that in a decentralized scenario, and so it's just a little bit of a different beast, and therefore there's trade offs that have to be made.
Also, give me some time to work on the landing page for the website and get something good there. I don't know if you guys have seen it recently. I updated the homepage kind of recently. There's a swap finally got the swap estimator up there on the homepage. So it looks a little bit more like something like Changely or Change Now's website. A lot of the swap services do something like that on the front ends. And if no one's checked it out yet, definitely do and just give any feedback. It's been something I've been working on for a while. So
That's awesome. By the way, I'm super excited to just rug Changely and Change Now. Like I'm super excited that like once streaming swaps launches, whenever the hell that's going to be, hopefully soon, and you can get a much better swap fee for much larger size trades, and then like when you compare us to Changely and Change Now, we just basically dominate on almost all such situations and scenarios, and so just like I'm just excited to just rug all their liquidity.
yeah, we already dominate Change Now. I checked the other day, and we basically damn, I'm forgetting numbers sort of, but it was like we dominate from like very low swap amounts, like somewhere like point three ETH or something like that, all the way up to like a Bitcoin to ETH swap rate, going all the way up to many ETH, like going up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. We dominate Change Now pretty much every scenario on at least like the main routes that I'm looking at. Changely is a little bit different story. They have really good rates, and yeah, it's going to be really great to start kicking them out of the competition. Where we can offer the best of both worlds, possibly, hopefully.
Yeah, but that's in like the Bitcoin ETH world,
Yeah.
right? And I think streaming swaps will not only be more efficient on like like a little more shallow pools, but it could even like actually give better. Like we could actually acquire trade volume from 1inch or Uniswap, right? Because like right now we use DEX aggregation to like swap like stables, for example, or whatever the hell it is, because it's cheaper to do it on like 1inch or something like this. Like THORSwap does this a lot, for example. And once streaming swaps becomes a thing, like people will have an ability to do that trade on THORChain and do it more cheaply than you would do it like ERC20 to ERC20. Do that on THORChain versus Uniswap, even though technically you're paying two Ethereum gas fees instead of one. But like once you get to a certain like trade size, it starts to make more sense to do it on THORChain side, at least from a fiscal perspective.
So you're saying BSC is going to be a huge hit?
It's going to be a massive hit.
Yes, I knew it.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Any questions? By the way, anybody who has any questions or comments from the audience who wants to come up and tell me why I'm an idiot, you're welcome to.
Well, I can just do that too.
That's true. Kyle, I always appreciate your idiocy comments on it. Unless we just want to call it quits. Anything else we want
There's
to talk
Patriot coming up.
Okay, cool.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, sorry if my voice, I'm a little sick right now, so I'm sorry if I'm hard to understand. My question was, I was listening to your part about going bare metal and the economic advantages, and I was looking at THORChain Bull. I had a minor interaction with him on Twitter, and he was saying, it's obvious if you go bare metal, you save so much money. So I was wondering if you guys had any knowledge or had your finger on the pulse, or do node operators are they just scared to do bare metal, or are they interested in it? I was wondering if you could highlight that, because when I think of THORChain, I look for reasons why THORChain won't succeed instead of reasons why it will succeed, because I could pull those out of my ass all day. But to me, it seems like the AWS economic disincentives of adding chains seems to be a big hurdle, maybe the biggest from my limited perspective. So I was wondering if node operators were interested in pursuing that. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't had any personal conversations with operators who were thinking about switching over from AWS to bare metal privately. I've had some conversations on the public mediums. Everybody else has seen more or less. My assumption is that there isn't a lot of documentation right now, and I think that's something that THORChain Bull was intending to do at some point. And he talked about releasing some documentation about how to build a bare metal. There is some documentation out there already that people can do, which is good for a specific scenario. But even that one was it's still using a cloud provider. You're just paying the bare metal price, which I think is I think called Volter VULTR or something like this, where you basically pay for a physical box. They're hosting it. They own the actual hardware. You're just renting their hardware. Versus AWS is more like containerization. It's not actually relational to an actual box. And so that doesn't really help people to get bare metal, meaning that outside of a cloud provider, right? Because technically even Volter doesn't actually allow you to run nodes for any chain, like THORChain or otherwise. Legally speaking, they've already kind of said that they don't support it. I think the biggest hurdle is that it does take a lot more. There's a larger investment to begin with. You have to spend, depending upon which hardware you want to get, but it could be anywhere between $5,000 to $20,000 or whatever, depending on how you want to structure your bare metal, whether you want to do mounted volumes through a NAS of some kind. There's tons of different ways you could configure set your bare metal, and they can have varying degrees of reliability and cost and this kind of thing. But I think that's the first part is there's an initial investment of 10, let's just call it $10,000 or $15,000. Let's call it that for now, and that's a bunch of money. But then you have to get those boxes. You have to set them up in your mom's basement or something like this. Make sure that you have some level of redundancy or reliability, all that stuff. And it's harder to be more reliable. You'll probably get more slashes, to be honest, if you're running bare metal than if you're running on AWS, just because the likelihood of your boxes going down or having some sort of problem is far higher, because obviously AWS's engineers and DevOps engineers are way better than our nodes at running bare metal, but running physical boxes, physical servers for obvious reasons. And so they do a really good job of it for obvious, does well. And our nodes, our operators aren't as experienced in that regard. And so the likelihood of them having more slashes are actually quite high, right? At least initially, until they fix all the bugs and work out all the kinks and, auto recover from scenarios A, B, and C. I think that's the biggest blocker, is just the initial cost, the additional technical expertise that you're required to do, and and having and supporting a high level of reliability. That's all difficult stuff. It's not something you just do on a Saturday when you're just got nothing else to do. That stuff takes months of work and effort and learning and education and running your own Kubernetes cluster. Like that's not easy. And so it takes time to do so. So you have to make a conscious choice to spend the time, money, and energy to do so.
Makes sense to me. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no worries.
Anyone else want to hop up here? Whenever people are done hopping up, then we can wrap up the space. Anything else you guys are thinking about? Oh, you know what? There's been some interesting stuff. Yeah, all this multi-chain stuff that's been going on. I'm sure you guys have seen that. That's actually pretty crazy. Like the rumors of the. I mean, I hate to be like spreading rumors on like this space. So, like obviously, I have no idea whether this is like legit or not. But they did suspend service to like a number of chains. Apparently, they don't have access to one of their servers or something, which is just like absolutely crazy. And like obviously like rumors of the CEO's arrest, and even like Binance, so like the Binance people, like they sent out like a bunch of notifications saying like if you use multi-chain for any like bridging services or stuff like that, we recommend you basically just like do not anymore. Basically, after seeing what's happened to a couple of the chains, like it's just clear that it's not really a secure service to be like leaving your funds in, and just like for, like possibly the collapse of the next bridge of this era. Who knows?
Yeah, seems likely at this point. I mean, honestly, like I don't know a whole lot about it. I haven't been paying as close attention as I probably should be, but like the fact that they can't reach the CEO, who is the only person apparently who has access to some of these servers, is just like, I mean, that should be I mean, as a technical person, that's like an immediate red flag of like ridiculousness. Like my assumption from the description is that like there's some private keys on that box, and in order to reduce the exposure, just the CEO has access to that box or something like this. Or something. This is my assumption that I'm making, a reasonable assumption. And when he's unavailable for whatever reason, whether he got arrested or not, or whatever the fuck is happening, or he rugged the whole thing or whatever, like who knows? But like, it's just like, I think it was pretty clear from the immediate when I first saw multi-chain and AnySwap kind of pop out, and I looked at their like white paper and that kind of stuff. I'm like, this doesn't make a lick of sense to me. And then to see it all kind of coming down is, kind of expected.
Yeah, man, another one bites the dust.
This is like an important thing though. Like I feel like this is one of the things the industry kind of misses as a whole is that the industry, because it's largely retail investors, and retail investors as a whole, don't have the skill sets required to really do due diligence on a particular project. Like they don't have technical knowledge, they don't have the mathematical understanding, they don't have the marketing understanding, they don't like a lot of other things. Professional VCs do, because they have entire teams that they hire and develop and this kind of stuff. And so it's like retail, it's so easy to convince retail to like put your money into this thing over here and just paint a beautiful picture that is, has nothing behind it. But retail will buy on the pretty picture rather than the substantive, like, the due diligence of it, underneath of it all. And so like, this is something I think we're missing on the industry, is that like there's so many people willing to shill so quickly some token because the picture was pretty, but so few are willing to like look at the underlying fundamentals and the design, the implementation details, and like, does this actually make sense? Does this actually accomplish the task that they say?
And a lot of it's purposely obscured by the projects as well. As someone who's looked into a lot of like different projects and things, just like myself, it is very difficult to find info on a lot of projects. On like actually how things work. It's insane.
This is one of the main reason why I wanted to build my podcast called Mad Blocks, is because like there's so few people.
Is this like, the paid advertisement? That was supposed to be at the beginning.
Right, sorry. Not a paid advertisement, more just like a point. More like a point of just like, it's like I just did recorded an episode the other day and it was about lens protocol. And in the process of trying to evaluate the implementation details of lens and whatever, of like how it actually functions and works, like it was actually really hard to figure out certain components of it, because like I read through all of their documentation that they have on their site, and like they reference something very quickly, like, oh, this is managed by multisig. Okay, next topic, right? And they like they kind of breeze by in half of a sentence, and like, whoa, whoa, wait, how does this thing work? Who's holding this thing? What powers does this thing have? Blah, blah, blah. Like, it's harder to understand how it actually works, because they purposely, I don't know if Lens purposely does this or not, but like in general, you're right. Like a lot of projects will purposely make it difficult to figure out how it all works, right? Because they don't want the underbelly to be shown.
I brought Juggernaut up here. Hey, what's up, man?
Yeah, yeah. Hey, everyone.
How's it going?
It's about bon. Very happy to see lending, borrowing happening now. It's a nice way to go. My question, my remark, it's for THORChain and Chad Baratford. Chad, you are skeptical about Dash and BSC or any else. Will they bring liquidities to the TVL? This is your words. Kind like Atom or Rimpool, which is ridiculous considering the volume of Atom. Currently, a pool must be created for each network. This is perhaps what needs to be rethought. You see what I mean? The real strength of sex is being able to use the same BNB or ETH vault on layer 1 and all layer 2s. Is it possible to see the same on THORChain in the future? Not say tomorrow, in the future, in 1 year, 2 years, I don't know. And please, just one thing. You think TVL first. Don't forget, please, the virtuous circle you put everywhere on Twitter, for example. More swap means more yield, more helpers, less slippage, so more high swaps, more yields, etc. Please don't put the cart before the horse. The engine is the swap volume. So BSC means more volume. This will be an engine, not the only one, but it's a volume. But I think it can be a boost, like that you and THORChain don't like marketing, but it's a boost also. Says it. It's my opinion.
Yeah, so a couple points with that, if I understand you correctly, and I hope that I do. I think that it's false to make the assumption that adding Spartan Smart Chain will bring significant volume. It'll definitely bring volume. Like it'll be, some trades will occur. Obviously, it will be zero. But the question is it significant volume, and is that volume significant enough to warrant the time that it takes to add the support to it, to launch it, to the cost of the nodes, the cost of the dev? Like people don't think about the cost of the devs that it does to just to maintain these chains, right? And watch for changes and like deal with any kind of outages that those chains have, and that can impact our safety or whatever it is. Like that all has a cost to it as well. And so the question just becomes, is the cost worth the reward, right? And for me personally, the answer is no at this particular moment, but could change into the future. You might think otherwise, which is perfectly valid to have a different viewpoint than myself, of course. But and if Binance gets added, we'll find out if I was right or if I was wrong. And maybe I'm right, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Obviously, don't really know. But when it comes to the marketing thing, as you mentioned, like the problem that I have with the idea of that THORChain should be doing marketing, and we talked about this very briefly on the lending Discord stage the other day, is that like when everybody talks about marketing, 99% of the time They have no idea what the fuck they're talking about when it comes to marketing. There's like THORChain should do marketing, right? It's just some sort of abstract idea. It's like in the years before, people would say, we'd solve this problem with AI. It was like just AI everything. Like AI will just solve this and arbitrarily, okay, it'll just do this and whatever. Like it's just like throwing a word and a term at everything without having any understanding of what it means to do the thing is like nonsensical, right? So if people want to see THORChain do marketing, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what they want us to do. Because right now we are doing marketing right now. We are in this channel. We are talking on Twitter when there's 60, whatever the hell the number of people are in this channel right now, and people come in and leave all the time. And like, that is marketing. Having a Twitter account, having a Spaces, integrating with partners, that is marketing, right? But like, if people want us to spend money to pay, Bitcoin Boy a bunch of money to shill the Rune token, or something like this, or like, should we do SEO? Is that what you're talking about? SEO? You want to do some SEO? Like, what is it here? Facebook ads? You want to start launching Facebook ads? Is that the thing you want us to, like, what is the thing that you actually want us to do? Right? I don't know if any of those things, Facebook ads, paying Bitcoin Boy, like, or whatever, like, these things do not make sense to me personally, but I'm not a marketer. Like, I'm just not my field of knowledge or expertise, and I'll be happy to talk to somebody who is. But like, I've seen projects do that shit in the past, Facebook ads and everything else, and it's meaningless. Like, it's non-substantive. They can market the shit out of a shitcoin all they want and pump the price, and it creates, in the end, some sort of pump and dump economics onto the asset, which is not, a good long-term perspective to have. For me, the marketing is like just having honest and genuine conversations that we do in this space, have a value proposition that we offer to the entire industry that nobody else can even come close to touching, other than the ones that fork us. And that's the marketing, is just providing a valuable service people want to utilize. That's more like a more real way of doing marketing than trying to like pump and dump some bunch of money towards Bitcoin Boy or whatever. Bitcoin Boy, whatever the fuck the guy's name is.
No, I definitely agree with you, Chad, on the marketing point. Yeah, it's like marketing is just such a broad term. It's like thrown around a lot, especially at the THORChain, like, in the THORChain direction. But there's no real like the market, like, obviously this has been said a million times, and like obviously there's people who are going to disagree with this, but like the marketing is. THORChain's core customers are the interfaces. They're the front ends. Like the core customer of THORChain is like Trust Wallet, and the customer is THORSwap and Thor Wallet and XDeFi. That is who is primarily consuming the product of like what THORChain does, which is like swaps and LPs and things like that. THORChain just the back end. I don't even know, like, honestly, I don't know what to promote when it comes to THORChain. Obviously doing like interviews and podcasts, like that is like that's what I gravitate most towards, just because I think it makes the most sense for like what THORChain actually is, which is just this backend infrastructure. Like, there's nothing to promote where, like, unless we just tell everyone, hey, send your Bitcoin to this address and you become a saver. That's not really a like an actionable thing. Like, go to THORSwap.finance and make a swap. That is like an actionable thing that someone can do, and that's not like obviously the back end is being powered by THORChain, but what's being delivered is not THORChain. So it's. It's in a strange spot. It's like Visa or MasterCard. I guess Visa did, or MasterCard did, like, have commercials and things like that, but that's just not really who this product is being delivered to, in my opinion. So yeah, like, obviously, like, I'm not like opposed to, like, marketing, and like there's things that I'm trying to do, and others are doing for like actually bringing like more awareness and like making like strategic partnerships and like bringing the name out that way. But like in terms of like what to market, there isn't really a product that's delivered by THORChain itself. Like it's just the infra that powers other apps. So it's like it's in a different spot, and like a solution that fits like one exchange that already has like a core audience of like, hey, we're going to market towards like Arbitrum people or something like that because we're a project on Arbitrum. We don't exactly have like a larger community to pull from, except I mean, I guess like obviously the entire crypto native community, which is a very, very broad audience. So I think it's just like a very large question, just like like marketing in general. If people have specific ideas, I definitely love to hear them and love to talk to people. So like I think that's been the most effective marketing for us. And it's definitely not like people don't know what THORChain is. Like even just like cold reaching out to people, plenty of people know exactly what this product is, and plenty of people use it. Like it's definitely not suffering from like a lack of like, man, this is the ghost town in here. No one's making swaps. Like people are definitely using the products.
I actually had some positive news on that front. I don't know if it's related to AnySwap or the multi-chain fiasco, but I've noticed a lot of new people come into the Telegram asking what THORChain is, and us giving us resources, me and Sam Yap. And so, I think as time goes on, they say the market initially is a voting machine, random popularity contest, but over time it is a weighing machine. And with all these subsequent failures of all these different dexes, I think we're going to see new yield, new users naturally because our chain has merit. It has the foundation. It's robust. It's strong. It's open source. It has all the positive attributes that makes us so strong. So I think we're actually doing quite well. I know it's frustrating, but if anyone here, like I went to the Litecoin convention in Las Vegas with my own money, and I made a lot of good friends like Johnny Litecoin. He's a big Litecoin guy, and he actually knows of THORChain, and he actually had an LP position on THORChain. I had no idea. So, people know about us, and they are using us. I think this will resolve itself in time.
Is THORChain like a back end?
Yeah, exactly. So THORChain is just the infrastructure that powers, powers swap services, powers savers that then like Shapeshift delivers and THORSwap delivers. So THORChain is essentially just the infrastructure and the security. Like that is all. THORChain is just a series of nodes that control this rotating TSS fault thing. Like and just how to economically secure those assets. Like that's all the core of THORChain is. And
is it like PayPal for crypto, bruh?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
mean, he might.
Yeah, I know. I agree with what Patriot was saying. Like that, like markets can be irrational, and they can always just chase the shiny object, whatever that shiny object is in a given moment. But like the position that I've always taken, and I think the project as a whole has always taken, is that like let's just ship, right? Let's just create and ship really valuable, really useful products that actually provide real service, right, and solve real problems for people, right? Whether that be cross-chain swaps in a decentralized way, whether it be interest on your Bitcoin, whether it be getting loans on your Bitcoin or other assets, like all those things are like things that the industry has never seen before THORChain did those things. And it actually creates like a significant purpose and value proposition for the whole industry to consume. And so my hope, and I hope I'm not being too ideological with this, but like my hope is that over the long term, people will, awaken to what THORChain does and how it provides what it provides, and all these little like, bullshit, fake THORChain products out there that say they do the same thing as us, but they're structured very differently, and maybe AnySwap multi-coin is an example of that, but like it just they're all going to fail. Even like Changelly and Change Now, they're like, they're doing centralized exchange with no KYC. How long can that survive before like, the government comes after that? Like, I don't understand why they're even around now, but at some point they're probably going to collapse.
Also, like a couple other things to add to that. It's definitely not like other like crypto services are like really growing in like in terms of like who's actually using them and like in terms of like new adoption. It's not like THORChain is unique in the regard of like, hey, price is going down, what's going on, it's like it's really not unique to THORChain, like even in the slightest. So yeah, definitely wanted to say that. And there's one more thing I wanted to say. And oh yeah, it was the actual performance of like the TBL, the network versus other major dexes, even in like, the past couple of months, which have obviously been like, a decrease in volatility, decrease in like token prices and things. Uh, THORChain does a lot better than almost, and then all the competition, like almost always, and definitely in all the largest protocols, which we definitely track and we talk about. I can't remember exactly the like the month on month stats, but um, this account frequently posts like how much like TVL there is, and just comparing them month on month to other DeFi protocols, you'll see that the performance is like very similar, and usually THORChain is either losing less or gaining more in terms of like total number of assets on the network. So just something to keep in mind that nothing develops in a vacuum, and everything is very very connected in this space. And let's go to N, and then we can close it out. And if Finley wants to come up again.
Hey guys, I just had a question. So I see that recently there's like a lot of hype um, from chain to chain. It's not like before where everything is hyped up, but we see like these sporadic like manias that happen in certain new chains that launch. Like for example, Pulse Chain had a new one, and I see a lot of talk about like Radix. I was just wondering, does the team have any plans to like capture that energy, like maybe have the swaps ready for that chain when it launches or close to its launch, so we kind of capture it as THORChain? Because I feel like there's hype and it kind of goes away, but I feel like if we capture that, a lot of people will turn into, wait a minute, this THORChain is a lot better than what they're doing, It might attract a lot of more investors.
Well, the short answer is no. And the reason why that is because the act of adding a new chain, like take Radix, for example. Radix is like not a fork of Bitcoin. It's not a fork of Ethereum. It's an entirely new structure about how a blockchain is built. And therefore, the technical cost to actually support such a thing is actually quite high. Not to mention that the biz dev aspect to it of forming a relationship and like getting the people behind the project, the community behind the project, to be like supportive of THORChain and do some co-marketing, adding some liquidity to the pool when it launches, all this kind of stuff, integrating to their wallets and their dexes, like all that kind of stuff. All those things are very long tail processes, and they take many, many months, a lot longer than these kind of like flash in the pan scenarios. But I'd also say, even if we had the ability to add those flash in the pan scenarios and quickly add Radix or quickly add this thing because it's like pumping for some reason or whatever, like that's not really aligned in my viewpoint of like how we should I don't want THORChain to be chasing the pumps and the dumps in a sense. I don't want to try to catch a falling knife, in a manner of speaking, and try to figure out what one's going to pump next or whatever. Like that's just like chasing unicorns and this kind of thing. It just seems like a complete waste of time and energy. Instead, I have the viewpoint. This is my viewpoint, not the viewpoint of the project or the community as a whole, but just I want to look at the fundamentals, look at what actually would benefit the project over a long period of time, and be a long-term partner rather than a short-term flash in the pan, right? And I think that's the viewpoint that I have, and so I wouldn't advocate to add Radix just because they're getting a lot of engagement all of a sudden, or their price is pumping for some reason. I would say I'd be open to adding Radix because I know the CEO of Radix personally, and he's a big fan of THORChain, and his whole team is really a big fan of THORChain, and so and they have a really difficult time getting listed on exchanges because they're such a different protocol. They're not a fork of Bitcoin, like I mentioned, and so it's very hard for them to get listed on an exchange like Binance or whatever. And so we can provide really good, valuable service for that particular community, and that particular community would be very appreciative of that thing, and really engage and add liquidity and trade through our network, blah blah blah, like all that stuff. And so I'd be interested in Radix because I feel like they would be a really good partner in many ways, not so much because the coin might be pumping or whatever.
Finley, what's up, man?
Hey guys, I just wanted to circle back to the marketing thing real quick. I was thinking about recently the fact that, THORChain has about $30 million in single-sided savers deposits right now, and some of the, companies that no longer exist that were centralized that were doing this, like BlockFi, Celsius, Voyager, they had billions, right? So they were 50x, larger than THORChain, and has and it always mystified me how they got so large, right? The only place I ever heard BlockFi mentioned, I think, was when I listened to a couple of Anthony Pompliano's podcasts. Um, and so I'd be curious, has anyone ever tried to reach out to like people from the marketing department at BlockFi or Celsius, or tried to figure out what marketing firms they use, just to have a conversation and be like, hey, what did you guys do? Was it just, you know, sponsoring guys like Pompliano, or were there other methods? Because there's got to be some secret sauce there that some of those companies used, and who knows, maybe some really good marketing people looking for some consulting work or something like that.
Yeah, you got to know the guy who runs the Canadian pension fund.
You've heard Gerald Cotton there.
Yeah, sorry, it's the joke.
So I've never talked to the marketing. I mean, I've talked to the guys over there at BlockFi a few times and had conversations with them in the past, but like I've never had the conversation about specifically marketing. My assumption like of why they grew so big so fast is because they're centralized, they can attract a different type of customer that is more difficult for us to attract, and that's largely like institutions, right? And larger like whales and that kind of stuff, because they like to have a personal connection with the person and that kind of stuff. I think that was really gave them the advantage more than anything else. And also being like having a board of directors, and like I think Anthony Pompliano was actually one of the members of their board, if I remember correctly. And Anthony Populano, is one of the largest voices in the Bitcoin community, by a good margin. Like him and a handful of other people, like Carter and Eric Voorhees is one of them, and other people as well. And so, like, I think that's really what it was more than anything else, is their connections to large institutions and personal relationships. In that case, that's my assumption. What it is, I could be completely wrong, and that would be fine, of course. But I think for us, if we have a different kind of task at hand than what they had, and it's a different road to walk down. Even though we're providing this kind of the same product, like interest on your Bitcoin, but the road we take is very different because we're decentralized and they're centralized.
Maybe. I mean, certainly a large portion of their customer base was industrial or institutional, sorry. But they definitely had a hell of a lot of retail as well. You can kind of tell from some of the noise about the bankruptcy on crypto Twitter, et cetera. And I still think it would be just worth, Nine Realms or somebody from the community who's gotten in, just trying to talk to some of those defunct companies' marketing departments, just to see, like, just to confirm, like, are you right? Was it mostly institutional and because they were centralized, or was there a lot of organic retail outreach that worked, that could, pivot pretty neatly to a decentralized protocol like THORChain?
I mean, I think the other thing that they had going for them was that they didn't have a quote shit token, right? Like Anthony Populano and that guy from like what Bitcoin did, I can't remember his name right now. Like they were all big advocates for BlockFi and talking about it, and a lot of Bitcoin maxis or hardcore Bitcoiners, for a lot of them, they may not want to put their precious sats into THORChain because it's a shit coin and it's going to go to zero and blah blah blah, and they're going to lose all their Bitcoin. Like that kind of mentality is something that they didn't have for BlockFi, but they had it for THORChain, which is kind of comedic because BlockFi and all those guys completely collapsed and they lost their Bitcoin. But like, I shouldn't be laughing about that. That's actually a terrible thing. But like, the irony of that is kind of obviously comical. But like, we're still around. We still provide what we provide, and maybe because of their collapses, they'll be more open to it. I don't know. But like, Bitcoiners are oftentimes maxis, and so like it's harder to get them to put their Bitcoin into something that has a shitcoin behind it, quote unquote.
True, but those companies also had a lot of deposits, of cryptos other than Bitcoin. They had a crap ton of Ethereum and a lot of what are probably truly shit coins as well.
True. That's fair. Fair
I
statement.
mean, yeah, you make a good point. I'm definitely gonna I'm gonna take some kind of look into this. And if anyone else has any info about this, then let me know because I'm definitely curious to learn. I mean, it's a good approach for sure to like just see how others are doing things because they're like I'm sure there will be companies built on top of THORChain that are essentially BlockFi, basically offering the Sabres product and LP products and delivering it in a similar way. And like they're going to go through a similar like product cycle and like marketing uh, engagement as like BlockFi or Celsius. So like I definitely think taking a look at like where they really succeeded, which is obviously like getting the product like really out there and front and center, and like obviously everyone knew what they were. Is like a really good approach. So yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. Actually,
Cool, appreciate it, guys. Also, just don't forget that what you've built so far has better savings rates than anything those guys ever offered too, which is pretty fantastic.
100%. But we'll see after this vote on 111 about Sabres yield and what's going to happen with that. If it gets approved, it'll drop for sure.
yeah. Cool. Should we wrap it up then? Been like 2 hours.
Yeah, let's wrap it up unless anybody else has any questions or anything.
I think we're good to go.
All right. Sounds good. Well, yeah,
All right,
let's do this, and I guess we'll do this time for the time being on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, just to accommodate Chad here. So we'll this will be the tentative time from now on, but we'll obviously keep tweeting out like when it's going to happen.
We gotta accommodate for Chad Thoreau here. He's just always a problem.
Yeah, it's all my
Chad has
fault.
never been a problem. It's Chad that's been a problem.
Chads take the fall for Chads. It's just what Chads do, I guess. But we do have there's a Thor swap space tomorrow if anyone wants to check that out. Since this one went to Thursday, we swapped the Thor swap ones to Friday, so did a little trade. But that's scheduled if people haven't got quite enough of their THORChain fix already.
Nice. And actually, this kind of works out better because, obviously the etymology of Thursday is it being Thor's Day. So now that we're doing the podcast on Thor's Day, it seems more appropriate. So we got there.
I actually kind of like that. It's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, well, all right. Sounds good, guys. Let's wrap it up. Peace.
All right. See you guys.
Later.